Jeff Riedel. I'm from Sun Valley Certification Clinics, and before Tara kicks us off, just wanted to give you a heads up on what we do with pediatric patients, because that's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. At Sun Valley, we've certified about 75% of all the pediatric patients in Arizona. We just did an 8-month-old baby 2 weeks ago. It was incredible. But our process is very simple for somebody who wants to get certified. As you will find out if you don't know already, every pediatric patient needs 2 doctor recommendations instead of the normal 1. So what we ask is that if you are the caregiver for a child, contact us ahead of time. Just don't come into the clinic. Call me, call the clinic. And then what we're going to ask you to do is bring the child's records to us. Either bring them, paper copies, or you can send them electronically. That way we've got the medical records. The medical records then get put in front of our doctors. We have 18 doctors. We've got 21 doctors on staff right now. So between those 21 doctors, 2 of them are going to say, yay or nay. So we do all that prep work up front, and then we're going to call you and tell you, okay, whatever your name is, we're ready to certify, bring your child in, and then we'll just do the final certification. That way, you don't have to bring your child in, sit in the doctor's office, the whole thing. We can get you in and out in about a half hour. It works really fast. As far as cost-wise, we don't charge you anything for our service. We do all the pediatric patients for free. However, there is a cost that you pay the state. It's $150 for the patient and $200 for the caregiver. Every pediatric patient has to have a caregiver, so you're looking at a total of $350. Yes, that's every year. Yes, it's not fair, but it is what it is. But our services are free. When you turn in records, please give us a cover letter on there with obviously your point of contact. We've got two sets of records that we don't know how to reach the parents because they didn't give us the information. So point of contact, a little narrative of what you've gone through, what you've tried already, and then our doctors can look at that. Okay?
I was going to ask you, because I know it may benefit some patients or their children, if they have the state assistance, does that still get them the state discount?
The state assistance would give you a $75 discount on the patient card only, not on the caregiver.
Okay.
So you're looking at, what is that? $270. So, okay?
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you,
All right, thanks, guys.
No, give us just a second. I think we have a technical difficulty. Sorry, your husband may have texted about the volume or something again. Do you want to double check that really quick? Sure. Okay. Because we have some people viewing live on Women Grow, so we want to make sure the audio is good before we,
Yeah, that's important.
So, people want to hear the music.
Okay, everyone, speak up.
He's just a quiet speaker, so it's up.
All right.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Tara, I'm events manager here at Midtown Roots. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank our sponsors for making today happen. So I wanted to start with, I just want to run through the goodie bag. I'll show you what you guys are walking home with today, and then give the vendors here a chance to just speak briefly, just to share a little bit about the company here. So we have a representative from Move, Katie. And they donated the Joanna gummies. So these are incredible if you haven't had them already. So these are a 10-to-1. This one that I have in my hand is strawberry. You'll want to read the package to make sure you know exactly what it is that you're ingesting, but it's a 10-to-1 gummy. So for me, I'm super lightweight. I microdose one of these and I'm pretty medicated. Everybody's a little different, so I love these options. Most normal people with a normal tolerance can eat one of these and still function. So they're great for pain relief, great for the daytime. So this is from Juana. Katie, do you want to say anything?
So a little bit about the Juana gummies too. The 10-to-1 is one of my.
We want to be able to hear you, so speak up just a little bit, yeah.
Sorry. The ones have gotten to be really popular, especially the 10-to-1 that you guys will get to try today. It's made with natural apple pectin from a specific orchard in Washington, which is kind of neat. so even if you cut them in half, you'll know that you'll get a specific dose in each piece. A little bit other than that, about those products, we'll have a wide variety of products in our whole line, anything from vapes to concentrates to flour to topicals, and then the Wanna gummies. We'll also be at Women's Grow event on Tuesday, so you can come by to see us then and learn a little bit about specifically our balm gel, the transdermal patches, and our inhalers as well.
Thank you, Katie.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Something she mentioned in that awesome little intro was Women Grow. You're also walking home with a free ticket to this month's Women Grow event. So for those of you, yes, for those of you that haven't been, I definitely encourage you to. It's a great way to meet people in the industry, outside of the industry, and just kind of hear what's going on with current politics and whatnot. So we've got a free ticket for you for that. We also have a 420 skincare bath bomb for you guys. Now, Margarita, did you want to speak on behalf of?
Yes, I was put me on the spot.
Yeah.
How you guys doing?
Good.
I'm good. As you guys know, my name is Margarita Thomas. I am the owner of 420 Skincare and also the owner of Start Living Recovery Home, where we help men and women get off drugs and alcohol. 50% of my proceeds goes back to the homes to help them get off the drugs. So now we're trying to raise money so they can get their medical cards. So that is my work of my skincare, the topicals. I will be coming out with my vape line as of 7/10. I'm also coming out with our, I won't spoil it, but I will let you guys know a little bit. But anyway, I will be coming out with 420 Medibles. So that's coming up by the end of this month, so stay tuned.
So for those of you that haven't utilized the bath bomb, this is a CBD bath bomb, so if there's anybody here that doesn't have a medical card, you're still gonna go home with a goodie bag with a bath bomb. You can break these up into several pieces if you'd like, or you can throw the whole thing in the bath, just depends on personal preference, so. I'm a thrifty shopper, so I break it up. All right, I want to thank Midtown Roots. Woo, woo, woo! Thank you, Midtown Roots, for allowing us the space for this incredible event. You guys are going home with one of these little cards. This is a free shorty. There are 1/4-gram pre-rolls. You make a purchase to redeem in our dispensary located just to your, just that way. I also want to thank Alyssa Brunelli with the green hair. She's our staff photographer, so she has been approved to take photos. And then I also want to thank Katie. She was our checking gal that got you guys in, checked in safe. She's going to be processing all the goodie bags for us. This will be available at the end of the event. So, for anybody that's new, that's never been to Midtown Roots, we do have a buy one, get one up to an 8th on select flour, or 20% off your purchase. For anybody that has someone in here, the referral is just the same. So if you refer anybody that's new in here, you guys can make some strategic partnerships right now. You'll want to get that buy one, get one, and 20%. I want to thank Red Lion certification. For those of you that bought raffle tickets, we are raffling off a free certification from Red Lion Doctors. They set up 3 days a week in our lobby at Midtown Roots. This is so you'll pay the state fee. We'll cover the doctor's office portion. So if you haven't gotten a chance to get a raffle ticket, please feel free to do so by the end of the event. Couple more items, and then I want to get us to the meat and potatoes of this event.
You're doing great. Thank you, Tara.
We've got sample packets from Undo. These are incredible. If you don't know what these are, yes.
Marlena can testify. She's used a few times.
You've ever overdone it on the edibles? I know you have. You can take one of these capsules, and it'll take anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, depending on each person. It'll basically reverse some of the effects that you get from that high. Your body's still going to feel pretty medicated, but your head's going to clear up. So you can put this in a safe place.
In your purse. Yes. I don't leave home without it. Just in case.
Another really cool CBD product, if you don't have a medical card, you get to go home with one of these. It's a CBD chocolate nib from Iron Chef. Super excited about this. I'm a CBD fanatic, so awesome for inflammation, anxiety, pain relief as well. So thank you to Iron Chef for hooking us up. Oh yeah. Woo. Sunday goods. Free joints for everybody. Thank you to our friends at Sunday Goods. I love the, you You can tell by the quality of their
That's
product, by the
for
quality of the
class.
glass. I buy these just for the,
Their packaging is very nice.
All right, and then we've got Baked Rose. Woo, woo, woo! Our friends at Baked Rose gave us a single 20 milligram gummy and then a little starter pack. So you got a lanyard and a lighter and all that good stuff.
Oh.
Yeah. Baked Rose is an incredible partnership for us here at Midtown. We've also got an educational pamphlet. That's one thing that they are huge on. They're not just about getting their product out. They want safe education going with it. So you've got an educational pamphlet to go with it as well. I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna hand everything off to Miss Parisa. We have an incredible panel here. I don't know that we've had this much talent in this room since we've opened. So you guys, thank you all for being here today.
That's nice.
I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here, ladies, and
on, though.
yeah, we'll let you do the introduction.
I have a question. Is it alright for us to take pictures?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
alright. Thanks.
Yeah. We're just trying to finagle those.
My computer keeps going to
Technical
sleep
stuff.
on me. Something's happening. Oh, keystone correction, execute. Do I need to push enter for that?
Sure.
Yay, is it working?
There we go.
Right. And it moved slightly.
It moved a lot. Let's try to fix that.
I might have.
I swear.
Let's go through them.
Okay, technical difficulties resolved. Yay. Well, I want to welcome you all. Thank you all for coming. I am Parisa Rad. I am AKA the Marijuana Momma. I am also help facilitate our Women Grow Phoenix meetings. So it's really exciting to be part of this industry. But what really brought me here is my daughter. I have a 17-year-old daughter now, who has a rare life-threatening condition due to opiates. You may have seen her on the wall as you were walking in, Yazzie. She's with her dog there. My daughter, Yazzie, was born at 23 weeks gestational age, weighing 1 pound, and she was completely blind, and she has cerebral palsy since birth. So we had a very challenging start and a lot of medical challenges. But all things considered, she lived a somewhat healthy life, I would say. We never even thought about the idea of utilizing cannabis until she had a surgery performed. She had scoliosis and they inserted 9 rods into her back, and she was given prescription opiates. So we did not abuse them, but she developed this rare life-threatening condition called superior mesenteric artery syndrome, where her lower intestine collapsed and she was unable to process or pass any kind of food. It was very scary. My daughter was heaving uncontrollably, puking green bile. It was the scariest time in our challenging medical 17 years. So this was just when she would turn 15. Right before she had turned 15. So Yazzie became a Make-A-Wish kid because we were not sure what the future held for her. We were worried we were gonna lose her. So I did everything I could to make sure her wish would come true, which was to meet Justin Bieber. So for her 15th birthday, we all became believers. And she just had the most amazing time of her life, but it was because of cannabis that we were able to go, because she became a patient 6 months before that. So she even told me in the bathroom, oh, thank goodness for cannabis, I wouldn't be here right now. Because she was bedbound and unable to leave her bed before. So cannabis has been a huge part of our lives, and I'm now passionate about teaching others that they can utilize this plant, and they don't have to necessarily go the mainstream way. They can take their health in their own hands, and I think that you can do that by educating first. So my passion is educating you all and teaching everyone about how this plant works with our body. So I want to welcome all of our amazing panelists here today, because all of these women are advocates for the plant as well, and are just as passionate as I am, and have very personal stories that they have embraced this plant and seen the miraculous differences in their own children and loved ones that they care for. So I want to quickly introduce everybody that's on our panel and let them all tell their individual stories, at least the mothers for sure. And we have our medical professional, This is Joanna Patterson. So she is our personal CBD nurse at home. I use that term loosely, so professional, medical professional, she's a CNA. But she has helped our entire family with dosing, as well as my 4-year-old, who's now a cannabis kid, she wants to call herself. So she utilizes CBD as well. We also have Brandy Williams. She's an amazing mom and advocate for legalization of cannabis, for adding the autism as a qualifying condition. And I'll let her speak to you all here in just a minute. I just want to kind of quickly go through everybody though. And then we have Audrey Kerger, excuse me. She is a radio host on High on Healthy. She is also an entrepreneur and has her own brand within a CBD line. And she's also our new sponsorships director with Women Grow Phoenix. And she's a mother of 2 and has 2 boys on the spectrum as well. And so she also utilizes the plant to help medicate her children. So, and then we have Jessica Cozier, who was actually one of the first women that I met in the industry when I was trying to figure out this crazy thing called cannabis. I reached out to her because she runs the nonprofit called Harvesting of Hope, and she helps children learn more, and families learn more about cannabis and utilize it to help with seizures. Her daughter Emma suffers from seizures, or did anyways. We've had you before, yeah, okay. But they utilize the plant, and she is a wonderful educator and advocate as well. So we'll kind of start on this end and then work our way through. And yeah.
I don't know. You already did it. I don't know. Well, I'm Jessica. I'm so excited to be here today. Much like Parisa, I'm a Canna mom, and education is my passion. I used to be a teacher, and I grew up in a really, really conservative household where drugs were bad. I was in the DARE era, and marijuana was looped into that lump. And so I voted against it actually in 2010 when it came up for medical here. And and look at me now. No, but like Parisa, my daughter is medically challenged. She has seizures. She has had seizures since she was 2 years old. She's 14 now. And at their worst, she was having like 47 seizures a day. And the doctor wanted to discuss brain surgery, and I was like, no, I don't think we're gonna go that route. I'm not ready yet to discuss that. And I'd had some other people talk to me about cannabis, and I hadn't even considered it. So I looked into it, found another mom who was a few steps ahead, found a wonderful resource within the cannabis community. And Emma has been doing really, really well. She's not seizure free, but she's drastically reduced her medication. And along with the seizure, she has global delays. And we noticed so many improvements on those delays, cognitively, behaviorally, emotionally, verbally. Once she started on cannabis, it was just amazing. And that was just icing on the cake. I just wanted seizure relief. But I know Brandy's seeing the same thing with her son as well. Once I saw those improvements, I wanted to be involved. I knew I wanted to teach in that regard. And so I've been given the amazing opportunity to do outreach and education at another dispensary in town. And I'm so pleased to just be a guest here on this panel.
Yes,
So,
thank you for being
thank you.
here. So Audrey.
So again, my name is Audrey Kerger. I got into cannabis about 4 years ago, but my story started when my son Ashton, who's now 7, turned 1 year old. Immediately after a vaccination on his first birthday, we saw an immediate skin reaction on his body. He had a rash from head to toe. When we called our pediatrician, they said, you know what, it's not a big deal. A lot of kids have this type of reaction. He may have even contracted the chicken pox from the vaccine that he received. Just give him a milk and oatmeal bath and he'll be better in a few days. We can't help you more than that. I did not even connect at that point that he had a vaccine injury, but I just kept going with what the American Medical Association recommends, and around the age of 1.5, we started really noticing a lot of changes in our son, and he was becoming very violent. His number one violent behavior was biting, and he was not just biting softly, he was biting people to bleeding. There was one incident at a gym that I was a part of where I was working out and he was just a door away, and I heard this horrific screaming, and I went into the room and he had eaten the back of another child completely open, about 5 to 7 bleeding bites on this little boy. While he had his iPad, and the staff knew about his issue. So he was not actually being cared for. I was actually asked to leave that gym and no longer return because of that. My son was kicked out of multiple preschools for this as well. We had CPS called on our family because they thought that we were physically or sexually abusing our child. And I just didn't know where to go. And when we went to our pediatrician, they said, put our son on Zoloft. And at that point, he was about 3 years old, and I didn't feel comfortable utilizing that type of medication for such a young child. And so I searched out a naturopathic physician. We started using a homeopathy remedy. We did that for a little over a year with no result whatsoever. But during that time, we had been asked by a few of our friends, why don't we utilize cannabis? And so being in the position that I am, I have family members that share my same last name that are police force throughout the valley. And they are very religious and they want to follow law. And autism, like we've heard, is not a qualifying condition. My sons do not have epilepsy. They do have autism spectrum disorder level 2. So I was unable to go the medical marijuana route. And what I did is I went online and I spent my days and nights when the kids were resting and taking their naps, looking up this information. And we're gonna share a lot of that information with you today. And what I ended up doing was starting to utilize some CBD products. And I didn't really get any help with the first year of CBD that I used. And then in September of 16, I was introduced to a product that is prescription medication in over a dozen other countries around the world. And I got to know the company and utilize the product myself, did not become intoxicated, which is a fear for a lot of parents that have children. They don't want their kids to be intoxicated. And with that, I started utilizing the product for my children. And within 2.5 months, almost 3 months of using this product, my son stopped biting, which is what I had prayed for 5 years. That's all I prayed for. It was on a letter on my bathroom wall that I looked at every day to please let me find a way to help my son stop injuring others, because he wasn't just injuring other people outside of our home, he was attacking his younger brother, myself, my husband, and our family members, and it was just very a traumatic and chaotic life for like 5 years. And so I have dedicated my time, energy, and efforts since that point to travel the world. I've gone as far as Barcelona, Spain, and all over the United States, sharing this education, the history, the endocannabinoid system, and that's why I'm here today. So I appreciate all of you being in this room to expand your minds and knowledge today. Thank you.
Hello, I am Joanna Patterson. I am an owner of Health's Angels. It's an advocacy and education group. We work nationally in non-medical states, medical states. It doesn't matter if you need information and about personal care and endocannabinoid system. We're there personally, we're there professionally. Previously, I am a restorative nursing assistant. However, having the medical knowledge is really great. Being a caregiver is why I went in the first place, to be a hospice nursing assistant. Originally fell in love with that. My brother was diagnosed on 9/11/2011 with a giant angiosarcoma behind his heart. And I had the absolute honor and pleasure to be with him in those last 2 months from diagnosis to passing, and really be immersed in the process, both medically and with medical marijuana. We knew cannabis wasn't going to do the rescue and recovery thing as is absolutely possible with most conditions with cannabis. However, the laughing 3 days before passing, eating were those moments that we remember, not so much the being sick. So, fell in love with the caregiving and medical side of it. After he passed, I went to school specifically to go into hospice. Learning that type of lesson, I think cannabis affects us all. When you grow up in an Italian Catholic family like I did back east, very, very programmed and very specific on their views of cannabis. I think everybody is capable of not only coming around, which is a term I don't use a whole lot, but when the impact hits you, not just with family, but friends and seeing it for yourself. These products that we do deal with and come to us were originally created to care for a loved one or the experimentation or alchemy of the plant. I fell in love with it because it's not just one thing that it does. Watching the emotional inflammation come down as well as physical inflammation has been fascinating. Needed more. I ended up doing product knowledge and endocannabinoid system education with the budtenders and patient advisors at Harborside in Oakland. Another absolute pleasure, from, again, personal home care to businesses outside of dispensaries, health and wellness facilities. Naturopaths are also in need of the practical application knowledge. So your input, all of what you're doing with your friends and family, and all the knowledge that you create, please, I always encourage to not only put it online, but these are the things that we store and put in our pockets for when someone else comes. You emanate sort of like this beacon, and it's beautiful when you're open enough to receive those people. Just answer the call. No matter how programmed they were in the past, I ask you to answer that call.
I have been shocked by some people being open to it.
Right.
Yeah, so never,
And
you know,
so, oh, now you want the cannabis, huh? Like
And
that.
who judges you too,
Right.
you know, like.
Right. That's the full circle. I always say cannabis is not just medical, it's very emotional. So any information I can provide here or there, or family members, sometimes they need a medical professional to make it okay, even if it's hemp derived, even if there's 10 to 1s and 20 to 1s and 1 to 1s and cannabinoids and terpenes and all these things. It's all one thing. It's all one beautiful genus and family of resources. And instead of going online and getting really confused right off the bat, you know, ask those specific questions, because usually that's not, it's not so weird. Don't get lost, see it as freedom. These are all resources. If this doesn't work, this can work. There's always hope. So instead of medical professional, I've been going with hope dealer and dope healer.
But not least. Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Brandy. I am the Arizona State Director of a grassroots parent-led national organization called Momma, Moms Advocating Medical Marijuana for Autism. What we do is we go state to state and basically get them to change the laws to include autism as a qualifying condition for medical cannabis. So our group is actually getting a lot of attention. We were mentioned in 2 studies, one being out of Australia. The studies being done in Israel, the research director there talks about our advocacy group. We are tied to world-renowned experts in the field, so they have helped us actually get 6 states currently in the last 2 years to include autism as a qualifying condition, which is groundbreaking. And so, thank you. This year, actually in April, Momma was was invited to speak in a congressional or a Senate hearing by conservative leadership here in Arizona, this red state. So that I was told by analysts, assistants, advocates, and lawyers that was one of the first times that's ever happened in Arizona. So we were very privileged. My son Logan has he's severely impacted by autism. He is a level 3 autism, they call level 3 autism. We were told by the best pediatric, developmental pediatrician in the state that my son was one of the severe cases of autism she's ever diagnosed. We've worked with some of the best doctors in Arizona, and we've tried a lot of therapies, a lot of protocols. My son required a lot of care, and we got a lot of services, and we felt like we got nowhere. So we turned to cannabis, and our lives are much different now. So happy to be here.
My computer's working, but it's not sending the transmission of the signal.
Well, we had it up and going a few minutes ago, but that's okay. We can totally do this off the bat. So we're gonna kind of break it down for you guys and discuss a couple things. What makes our panel a little bit unique, I think, too, is not only are we marijuana mamas in the sense that we medicate our children and we utilize the plant, but we also use it ourselves. So I would say all of our moms are also medical marijuana patients, and we have learned that we can also consume cannabis and reap the benefits as well. I don't have to have a rare life-threatening condition to use the cannabis. I don't have to take Xanax anymore. I can be totally pharmaceutical free, just like my daughter. So, but deciding to go this route can be challenging for some parents. It can be confusing. It can be scary because you don't know what you're supposed to say or how to say it or who to say it to, and there's all this like legal implications, like worried that maybe your children would be taken away or something crazy. So we want to just kind of go through the education, the science of the plant, and then kind of talk about how we talk to professionals, whether it's our doctors, our teachers, or our new friends. This is something that's part of all of our lives, and so we're very transparent with it. So we're going to kind of give you guys the tools of what we've done and our journey the last couple of years, and share that knowledge with you, and hopefully you can take that home and use it as well. So Audrey's going to start with the history of cannabis and kind of just explain to you more about the plant and where we are today right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just want to interject. I think when starting this discussion with anybody, whether it's friends, family, professionals, it's really important to know exactly, okay, well, what is cannabis? Like, I want to know what cannabis is so I can make sure I'm relaying that information accurately, and part of that is the history of cannabis, because it's got a long history, and the endocannabinoid system. So we thought that these are two really important topics to start with so that we can kind of build that foundation.
Awesome. So I'm going to begin by just telling you guys a little bit of a history lesson. What we have discovered now through archaeology digs, as well as looking at old paperwork and documents, is that hemp cannabis, which, and nowadays we have two separate plants, but I'm not going to get into that, but all cannabis was called ma in ancient Chinese cultures over in the Asian countries. And we now know that one of the first civilizations that was located in Turkey that had over 10,000 individuals living together and working together, which was really that first sign of like civilization not living in caves. We have found a baby that was wrapped in a hemp cloth. And so this shows us that hemp and cannabis has been utilized for over 9,000 years. I think that's really important for people to understand. I know that Joanna is going to talk about the endocannabinoid system, but there's even talks going around within history and people saying that our bodies actually developed with this system because this plant has been on this planet for so long. Also, we know that the oldest records of hemp farming date back to over 5,000 years ago with the original Chinese dynasty that really pushed civilization forward into the way that we live now. And also bringing it over to the Americas, that happened with our original ancestors back in the 1600s. They were utilizing cannabis seed as a food source. It was one of the most heavy sources of food at that time for individuals who were traveling from England to the Americas. Also, something that I think is really fascinating is that they would take tar and the hull from the cannabis, which is the fibrous material, and they would mix it together and spread it on the outside of their ships so that the ships wouldn't sink traveling the distance over the Atlantic Ocean. All of the ropes and sails were made from hemp fabric cloth. So they were also utilizing this for all stock animals. So think cows, pigs, chickens, goats, lambs. This was their basic food and nutritional source. So when we were slaughtering these animals, our ancestors were actually eating cannabinoids on a daily basis through animal protein. And a lot of people today forget that when we eat animals, we're actually eating their protein because of the fact that they received their protein from the plant source that they were eating from. So that's why a lot of people are looking at vegetarian and veganism today, because we can get a whole variety of proteins into our bodies utilizing plants. And that's why we are lazy, to be quite honest, to slaughter the animal, because they've done all that hard work of eating all the plant material all day long, which is what all of those animals do on the farms. And we are missing out on feeding our animals this, which is making us have these disruptions in our bodies because we're not fulfilling the system. We are all malnourished. And so with that, I want to remind people that in the United States pharmacopoeia, from the 1800s all the way until the 1940s, different cannabis medicines were used, both sativa and indica-based medicines, which are both cannabis cultivars. And so we see that this was something that our current pharmaceutical companies like Eli Lilly and Pfizer, who was bought, that has become very well-known companies that are making these pharmaceuticals, they all had cannabis products in their lineup. Whether it be a tincture that they would give to an individual who came in with cramps, or somebody that had seizures. It has been utilized in so many different ways. Now, how did we get to where we are today is a really big question that people pose to me. Well, why is it illegal if you say that it had all these good benefits? It was making clothing, it was, feeding the animals, and it was keeping us healthy, which we didn't know the scientific reason why until the technology that we've come to today. But the reason why we're here today in this prohibition age is because in 1935, alcohol prohibition was ended, and the ATF was out of a job. And there was a gentleman who was running the ATF at that time. His name was Andrew Mellon. And Andrew Mellon had a stakeholdership with a company that you may know today. It's called DuPont. And DuPont created chemicals. And the chemicals they were creating were being utilized on trees to help us make paper products the way that we currently do today, because most paper products were made from hemp fiber as well. And they teamed up with another gentleman. He actually created a new division in our political system that we now know as the DEA, and he appointed his nephew-in-law to run it, and that's Harry Anslinger. If any of you know Harry, if you don't, I would highly recommend hopping onto YouTube and watching some of the discrimination that he caused around this plant. Because we actually call this plant marijuana, and it has everything to do with pretty much it has everything to do with race. If we think back to what was going on in the 1930s, it was very white supremacist, and I hate to say that, but it is the truth. It is how we were living at that point in time. And so they criminalized this plant by utilizing individuals like Hispanics and African Americans, and saying that for an individual who would utilize cannabis, whether or not it was in a medical form or in a recreational form, that they would be going outside the white lines, let's just say. And they also had another individual that became very close friends with them, and this gentleman's name is William Randolph Hearst. And William Randolph Hearst still today owns over 360 different media outlet publications around the world, like Harper's Bazaar, many news stations, radio stations, and what William Randolph Hearst also owned was a lot of land in the West. And at that time, there was a lot of trees in the West. And he wanted to cut down those trees and make paper. And so he was utilizing that friendship that he had with Andrew Mellon at DuPont, and they created this huge hysteria that we now call reefer madness that has blinded so many of us. And they changed the name of cannabis hemp to marijuana so that they could lie to the medical professionals that were utilizing this plant every day in their practices for their patients, and that's how they were able to vote it to become illegal. And also they put a tax on it for farmers. So the farmers who were utilizing this as their main staple food for their animals were no longer able to grow it because the tax was so high on it that we stopped feeding our animals their basic food and we started feeding them what? Corn, wheat, and soy. And now we're injecting our animals with so many different products, and then we eat that flesh and we are brutally abusing these animals and putting that in our body, and it is disrupting the way that our bodies should normally function and balance in homeostasis. And that kind of goes into the ECS as well, but just know that we were able to pay our taxes with hemp at one point. And we were able to grow this freely. All of our forefathers, John Adams, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, they all fought for this plant. And they all have quotes that you can find very easily saying that if we utilize this plant properly, our country that we were trying to grow at that point would be the strongest country in the world. And I believe if we take those messages that those men who were really great leaders of our time and put it into what we're doing today, we could really change the world. Because even in 1940, Henry Ford, who was making the first cars, created a hemp biofuel that ran a vehicle. So we're fighting wars every day about petroleum. We're putting petroleum into our bodies every day through prescription medication. That's really what this is all about, keeping us sick and keeping this plant away from our bodies that we vitally need it. And so with that, I am gonna turn over to Joanna to talk about the ECS, but I hope that you guys got a great little history lesson in a few minutes.
Well, that was awesome, obviously. The history and the culture are just as fascinating as the actual medicine, how it works in the body. I would love to say that it's a miracle, cannabis is a miracle, or hemp is a miracle, or CBD, or THC, or any of these cannabinoids is a miracle, but the fact is that they are our biological right. We are as bioavailable to it as it is to us in our bodies. So, for example, the ECS, or endocannabinoid system, I wish it had a different, more awesome name, because check out right away. Endocannabinoid system deficiency disorder, like you're gonna start to hear that. Probably the first commercial for a synthetic cannabinoid that you'll see on TV will be for clinical endocannabinoid deficiency. I'm sure with a disorder on the end. And that will basically be a vitamin containing not necessarily THC, but these nutrients that we get and we recognize as food and medicine from hemp and cannabis. I didn't understand the internet until I understood the endocannabinoid system. It is the largest receptor signaling system in the human body, and mammals, by the way. Dogs, dolphins have them, vertebrates really, and in their own dosing, they also eat hemp and cannabis every chance that they get. It's definitely being researched as how far it goes back in our evolution, but this system is more ancient than our other functioning systems to date. So it's the internet. Does that make sense? It's everywhere. it's in our central nervous system, it's in our organs, it's in our skin. So when it was discovered, they needed to know what was turning it on, what was lighting it up. Turns out, we make cannabinoids. We make a couple different compounds that help us function through our young lives and into adulthood. The first time this system is ever activated is through breastfeeding. So if that's an idea of how primal and how natural that is. So when we create these endogenous cannabinoids, we can assist our bodies in supporting the system just to make our own fun juices like dopamine and endorphins and things like that. It's really on that same sort of level. Runner's high. Runner's high, who can tell me what runner's high means? Or if you've experienced them, what you're told that causes runner's high? Anybody? Endorphins.
Yeah.
Great. So endorphins are awesome, but they're actually not responsible for the high feeling. It's a carrier. So endorphins are released, but they are not small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier. Right. So guess what is? Anandamide. Anandamide is, and that we make that. We create and another one called 2AG, but anandamide is such a wonderful example to speak about because ananda is a direct translation in Sanskrit to bliss. We make bliss particles. I mean, if you didn't know, and we can tap into this like the internet. So, as far as cannabis being emotional and the system being biological and the way it is activated between humans inside the body, it is our balanced system. There's CB1 and CB2 receptors to get a little bit more clinical. CB1 receptors are in the central nervous system, all the organs. Central nervous system really means electrical system too. You know, the nerves, our battery, our computer. And it's weird for me to talk about tech because I shut everything down that plugs in. But this is really the feeling that I would imagine that people get excited about the network and how it works and how fast connectivity can be, how fast information is passed. So CB2 receptors are accessible and present in the skin, and immune cells. Inside the immune cells we have receptors for anandamide, 2AG, and an array of beautiful cannabinoids that are found in cannabis. Cannabinoids are found in other plants too. Hemp, hops, these are around, as are terpenes. These are all things that are bioavailable for nutrition and health. So when you are what you eat, right? And you are what you eat, the cows eat. And, right, and what pigs eat. So that is absolutely fascinating because we've heard terms like food as medicine and cannabis as medicine, and meditation is really close to medication in my point of view as far as the healing. So when we're downloading food as medicine and cannabinoids as medicine, we're putting the information in. The endocannabinoid system has the capacity to, first of all, it's the 12th system of the body, but the other 11 systems are very separate in their own functioning. If you were in a room with the skeletal system and the digestive system, all in a room, all lined up like thermostats, the endocannabinoid system would be regulating and taking notes on all of them, making sure that everyone's on the same page. So when we're not taking notes and we're not regulating, they become very separate and they start to present as different imbalances. You know, diabetes can start to present in many different conditions. Fibromyalgia, all these things that are chronic and long-term and things like that, where it's always been like that. These types of things are being attributed to a cannabinoid deficiency. Like you'll see the commercials for it, but don't take the synthetic ones. Just doesn't work as well as plant matter does. Right. So, in its effectiveness and in pharmaceuticals, it's actually pretty funny that we can, no thanks, I got it. This is the better type and whatever. So between hemp and cannabis, we can massage this system back to health. When we have a calcium deficiency, what system does that affect? Right, skeletal system. So that's a type of deficiency that if it goes too long starving, if it goes too long with a deficiency where your body is putting the calcium somewhere else for no reason, that's an imbalance. We're not absorbing what we need to absorb to put it into the bones, plus genetic predisposition. But the skeletal system past a certain point cannot be sort of nursed back to health. That's a remission situation. That's comfort care and making sure there's protocol for after osteoporosis. The endocannabinoid system, I believe it's because it's so ancient and so primal to us. No matter how deficient, we can always nurse it back to health. It is a mother system connecting all your systems to make sure we're on the same page and we're trying to be as balanced as possible. Homeostasis is the eventual goal, but coming into contact with free radicals, coming into contact with, we hear there's stuff in our food and there's stuff in microplastics and you can go crazy with this. Endocannabinoid system loves to send information to the lymphatic system to put these toxins in the correct places to get rid of them. These are the balances that you start to see. It's not cannabis works overnight and that's it. It's so fast. I'm in pain and I put it in and then so that is a possibility, but it's the health benefits on the everyday with something like CBD or hemp as nutrition is becoming more and more vital. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity now. So I love speaking about the endocannabinoid system because I know that whether it's we're supporting the system and making our bliss particles and putting in phytocannabinoids to help that along and balance brain and body. Central nervous system, we have neurons here, we have neurons in our hearts, and we have neurons in our guts. So when we're activating these systems with certain cannabinoids and all this, whatever your personal regimen can be, health-wise or medically, these are the micro things that are happening, and these small balances really add up. For example, like Audrey was talking about eating hemp and it being part of our diet and evolution in our primal. Hemp protein, hemp seed oil. It's very confusing. There's a lot of CBD products that just say hemp oil. There's a lot of hemp products that are at Sprouts that say hemp oil. And what does that mean? And that's compliance issues and things like that. But hemp seed oil is absolutely amazing. Should have never really made it outside of our diet for the skin, CB2 receptors, psoriasis, eczema, all of that. Just the seed oil. We're not even talking about the therapeutic cannabinoid of CBD. Body takes it in, like at breastfeeding for nourishment, comfort, balance. These are exchanged. So I look at hemp seed oil or a hemp protein, working it into a lifestyle as sort of stating that deficiency that we all pretty much have, especially in your 30s, if you're not consuming phytocannabinoids or engaging in cannabis in some way or another. Now, fish oil. Who takes fish oil? Omega complex. Super omegas, right? So that comes from fish, but it doesn't. It comes from the algae and the plant matter that the fish eats, and we extract. So where it gets a little screwy is that hemp seed oil contains a 3-to-1 ratio of omega-3 and 6s. That's perfect for us, for human consumption. That is what we are built for, a 3-to-1 ratio of 3 and 6s. Commonly in these fish oil supplements that and like super omegas, they have more of the 6s. The new research is that an overabundance of omega-6s can throw off the endocannabinoid system. So your balance system is then thrown off because of this supplement that you're trying to regulate. So when in doubt, look to hemp, look to cannabis to see the regulatory value of it. And then when we need to get into some medical conditions, that's only a baseline or a base tan for massaging the system, creating what we can create, and then we have a clearer picture for cannabinoids and terpenes and things like that, as cannabis as medicine. But cannabis as nutrition, I really encourage juicing. I long for the day where I can walk into a Sprouts and grab a bag of fresh cannabis or hemp to take home to eat.
Well, now you're kind of all see why we chose cannabis. You can see the reasons based on the history and the fact that our bodies already work with this plant. We're obviously all deficient of these cannabinoids. So it was an easy decision for us in our severe medical states that we were with our children. But again, I encourage you all to look at that as an option as well, because we don't have to be critically sick to utilize the plant. So that kind of brings us to us and our mom journeys, if you will, and how do we talk to our kids about this? How do we talk to our professionals and our doctors and everybody else that's gonna be part of this team that's gonna help us with our children? So I think,
Real quick, just not to interrupt, I'm sorry, but I would, I guess that the majority of you are here either because you are a cannabis user and you wanna know how to talk to your kids or to your family, or you have a child who is a cannabis user, and how do you talk to their team, their siblings? So I think we have a good mix, and so I'm hoping that what we discussed today kinda hits the spot for you.
totally, yeah. So I guess we can kind of hit it with the both ends that we're patients and so are our children. So how did I talk to my kids about it? For me, it was an easy transition because I felt that I was replacing Xanax with the plant. So that's mommy's medicine. I mean, just plain and simple. That's how I refer to the plant. They do know that it's called cannabis. I mean, don't get me wrong, but they're like, oh, mommy's using her medicine. So I'm very open. Unlike some other parents that may feel the need to hide it, I don't want to hide it from my children. I want them to know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I'm very open, and we have this dialogue in our family. So even my 4-year-old, as I mentioned, is a kind of kid. So we use Marvina's topicals, in fact, on her when she's got a little boo-boo or something. I need a cream on it. Oh, my God. So, I mean, it is a family affair. We utilize all of these products. But we're very open about it personally. So I know each of us have other perspectives on it, but this is just my own personal. I know that I'm not breaking the law, so I think that's the important thing. If you're legally using cannabis, then there should be no fear in that sense that you're doing something wrong. My daughter is legally a cannabis patient as well, so I'm not legally doing anything wrong by giving her, my 17-year-old, the medicine as well. So I think knowing your legal rights is very important. So if you're trying to experiment with something, maybe don't tell everybody about it. You know, you don't want to be on the up and up at all times. I know that brings us to Jessica's journey. She has a younger child, just like myself, that does not use cannabis, or maybe he uses CBD. I'm not sure.
CBD,
okay,
yeah.
so CBD is a
We're
family
a
affair at this
family.
point. But he's not the medical marijuana patient. So do you want to kind of tell them about how you navigated your son's journey?
Yeah, let's tell, like Parisa, I've got one medically fragile child and another who is neurotypical, if you want to call it that. And like Parisa, we were also very open and honest. It was a little hush-hush in the beginning because this was something new for us, and we had voted against it, and we were like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? But once we saw these amazing benefits, it's impossible for anyone close to you, not just those living in your home, to see these benefits. And whether that's your daughter or son who's replacing an anti-seizure medication, who's got the fog that's finally been lifted, or it's mom's not taking Xanax anymore, she's taking it in another form. Again, it's all medicine, and I think that the foundation of talking to our families and those around us is adopting that vernacular that this is medicine, this is cannabis, and it's medicine, and we're using it for those purposes, to treat something. It was really funny, my son was in Cub Scouts, and so when my my daughter started cannabis, she was about 9 and a half, and so my son was about 7, and he was in Cub Scouts, and he was looking through his Cub Scout book with his dad and everything, and it was about drugs and alcohol, and it said, you know, marijuana, drugs like heroin, marijuana, cocaine, like all this stuff, like, and alcohol is bad. Okay, so my son is like, well, Mom, Emma takes marijuana, she takes cannabis, I don't understand, this is good for her. So it was a great teaching moment, and, you know, being a former teacher, I'm all about the teaching moments, and how can I redirect and kind of set the record straight for my son and share this information from a truthful perspective as he sees it, that no, you're right, this is a medicine. It's also important for us to mention that we know as a family, as a society, as people, that anything can be addictive. People ask me, is cannabis addictive? Well, is shopping addictive? You know, like alcohol, like
You can be addicted to anything, pretty much.
To anything, so anything can be taken to the extreme, right? And so there's that balance that we share with Mason and Emma. You know, you see Emma taking her pills. She uses encapsulated flour 3 times a day. That's what she does. Now, if she chooses to start vaping later on in her life, you're gonna see her doing that 3 times a day, and that's her medicine, and that's okay. And coming from that open and honest place, where he can ask those questions and not be afraid of the answer or the product, or, you know, it's what's so funny to me the other week when school was still in session, God bless the teachers in school, we were at the island and I was preparing her cannabis. Like I said, I encapsulate the flower for her. And right next to me is Mason with his math book. I'm measuring up cannabis, he's got his math book, we're working together, and it's just a picture that I was, but yeah, it's totally normal, but like 5 years ago, I'd have been like, you guys are crazy. I'm never gonna have an ounce of this stuff sitting right here, like, measure it out, and just doing math with my kid. So it's funny where life takes you, and
Order of operations.
yeah, and I, you know, from someone who voted against it, who's now, I'm blessed enough to be able to sit up here with amazing moms and talk about this. I've done a 180, and so I feel like if I can come from a place of humility and say, I was wrong about cannabis, and I fully admit it, and I'm going to teach my family the right way, that's how we do it. So I think that's how it starts. It starts with that foundation of honesty and trust and a little knowledge about what we are working with here, because it's really important.
And honestly, the fact that I'm so transparent with my kids makes it a non-issue. Like, they don't really, it's not a big deal. You know, it's like, oh, Mommy's using her medicine, I'm gonna leave her alone because she shut the door in the bathroom and she's probably gonna be a lot nicer if I let her. You know, so it's just become, and again, to kind of touch on that over-intoxication kind of issue too, I wanna kind of touch on that because I do let my daughter vape, and my daughter does utilize concentrates and THC. She's not just utilizing CBD, my 17-year-old isn't, and she's not getting to a place of over-intoxication though. There is a way to manage your dosage, so you're just taking care of the medical conditions, so she's got pain, she's got chronic nausea. There is ways that we manage and we make sure that she's not, acting out of control, if you will. I see her as a normal child when she's using cannabis again. I can see her on the floor playing with her sister, laughing, enjoying family times, unlike before. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
It is clear. It's a good point because people think, and my mother-in-law was so funny. We went out to lunch one day at the very beginning of our journey, and she's like, well, THC just makes you high. Any amount. And I'm like, no. And so I had a friend here who had a quicker wit than I, and we were at a Mexican restaurant drinking a beer, and she's like, well, that's just like saying this amount of beer is gonna make you drunk. And it took my mother-in-law back. I was like, yes. I'm not gonna get in trouble for that one. But it's true. Just because you consume cannabis, THC in any form, you don't have to be high. Are people looking for that? Absolutely. Some people are looking for that. But especially for our kids, we're looking for them to be functional. And whatever amount of THC or CBD that takes, that's what we're looking for, is functionality.
And I think that brings us to the doctors.
Yes.
Because right? I mean, a lot of us have medically fragile children, so the doctors are a big part of our
Yep.
parenting with these kids. So Brandy, I know you've gone through doctors and you can kind of shed some light on how did you introduce it to your doctor?
So there was no way they weren't noticing a difference. My son was banging his head 75 to 150 times per day. We literally had to have my son wait in the car with our HAB worker until they were ready to bring him back into the office. They would get to do their exam, and we would have to quickly take him back to the car and buckle him in so he got that deep pressure and so I could have a conversation with his doctors. So there was really no way that
You were gonna hide it.
there wasn't. I was going to. First, we started off with CBD only. I was, even though my son had a qualifying condition, and in Arizona, they just passed the concentrates. They allowed concentrates, and so that kind of basically opened up pediatric access. And even though my son had a qualifying condition, we were seeing some of the best doctors in the state and abroad, and we saw doctors outside of Arizona as well. And we did not want our doctors to find out that we were using medical cannabis. I didn't want them to test for it or find out or find it in the system. So we used CBD only, and we quickly found out that my son needed a lot more support than CBD only. And so I was terrified for the doctors to find out, but I got to a point where it was just
Why were you terrified?
because I needed those doctors. Yes, basically, my son has a case with the Federal Court of Claims in the Health and Human Services Department, and we are involved in a lot of studies and engaged with a lot of scientists all over the world. And so,
We're federal.
yeah, he's in many medical studies. So I didn't want them to kick us out,
Right, okay.
essentially. And so it just got to the point where I was done keeping everybody happy, and I just wanted my son to be happy. So I went and got him qualified for his card when he was 5 years old. That was over 3 years ago. And Harvesting Hope was one of the first groups that I was actually in way back in 2014. So, yeah. And so that's how we got started. And once we gave him his first dose, we couldn't hide that.
So you were just very transparent with the doctors, knowing that you weren't doing anything wrong, that you had this
Afterwards,
medical marijuana
yeah,
card.
after I got his card, they were just like, we couldn't even walk through the door without therapists,
Right.
teachers. Like, I have the first interaction with my son and his music therapist. She's sitting there, and within 2 minutes into the song, she turns to the camera and was like, wow. My speech therapist saw it as soon as she walked through the threshold of my house.
So I think it's important for people to know, though, that doctors may not approve what you're doing. I mean, they're not there to do that. They are not your medical marijuana evaluation doctor. They're not.
And so with that, essentially, I was really surprised that all of his doctors were really supportive. They were like, what are you doing? I wanna know. And they started sending me their patients to try and get qualified. His 80-year-old neurologist, one of like the best neurologists in Arizona, was like, I can't legally help these kids, but I'm sending them to you, tell them how you got qualified, I'll help them. And so
That's called not doing harm. I'm sorry.
Right.
and
They
that's
don't harm.
basically what I was going to get to, is that nobody's gonna advocate for your child but you.
Yep.
Right.
So one of the
And
things that I
so
ran
if,
into.
I could give you any piece of education here today, it would be that you have to become informed consumers. Knowledge is power, and you would be surprised. I mean, if you don't have a doctor that takes their oath seriously, first do no harm, and does not have the well-being of you or your family in mind, it is time to move on.
Yep.
So,
Doctor works for you. Doctor works for you.
I have to know everything about cannabis, I'm sorry, but,
Excuse me,
I'm just, if, just like that sentence, I don't know enough about it, but here's where a resource is. That's all
Yes.
that you should expect. And next time, can you bring me literature? If you found research, I mean, it's like, you know, we go in and say, oh, I saw on WebMD that I have these 5,000 conditions and things. When they hear that, you know, they kind of click off. But when you're saying, this is what on my the research in Israel, here's a printout. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this in relationship to my child's case. You know.
And some of them will shut you down, and that's
Right.
when you
Move on.
That's when you
That's
move on.
okay.
Yeah.
It's
So
okay.
we actually,
Well, I was just gonna-
my son actually, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Audrey.
I wanna ask
Oh.
something.
You
I'm
got a
an
question?
82-year-old woman who has nothing to do with, I know, background in marijuana. So you're saying words, I don't even understand, what's CBD, what's THC, what?
Well, if you grab any one of our business cards and we can sit down and any of us can give you a full education, that is really what I do professionally, is educate. As you can see, I can talk off the cusp about history. I could go into way more detail about the endocannabinoid system. I have a 3.5-minute video.
I don't even know what that word
It
is.
is, it means endogenous, means internal. So endo means inside.
Okay.
Phyto is meaning a plant. Phyto is like a plant,
I thought it
right?
was my
So
dog.
endo is internal, and cannabinoid is the plant. So we are finding the molecule on the plant that we call cannabinoid. We also have our internal cannabinoid system that is creating internal cannabinoids, and then we utilize the external or phytocannabinoids to help regulate and balance that system. Now, I can send you, like I said, a video that will go into more detail on that, but what I did wanna mention is about the physicians. I work with a team of medical professionals that did not understand what I was doing. And I wanna tell you, each and every one of you, I spent a year and a half educating myself before I started giving a CBD full spectrum. My son does have THC, but it is the federally legal limit because I cannot break the law and put my family in jeopardy. I have had my pediatrician call CPS on me,
Oh.
okay? I have had CPS in my home more times than I can count. And to be quite honest,
I put all on my
you
son's
need to be
documents
very, very
at
educated
cannabis
prior to going and
medicine.
speaking to a medical professional
Definitely,
about
I
this.
definitely recommend.
No, I've never had anybody.
You know what we're gonna do?
It's probably
It's
like
on his social security, it's on his CBD, it's on his medical, it's on everything.
So really quickly, I
You
know
have a
we wanna be sensitive to everyone's time because we really appreciate you guys taking time out of your very busy days. And we definitely wanna get to questions. We're gonna have a little Q&A. We've just got 2 more little topics and then we can get to those questions.
We only have 4 more minutes too, so we wanna make sure we finish our topics before opening it up. That way people need to leave, they can, and we wanna be courteous to their time, so.
Absolutely.
Our next topic is how to talk about it with your teachers, your children's teachers, so I'm gonna have our
Yeah.
teacher kind of highlight that.
So it really what you have to think about is what is the relationship that you have with your child's teacher? What is the relationship you have with your child's school? Are you in a place where if you needed to move schools or districts, could you? So there's a lot of different variables that are playing out when you are considering talking to your children's educators. If they are having amazing results, like Brandy's son or my daughter, or any one of our kids, it's gonna be obvious. They're gonna be like, "What are you doing?" But it was, when we first started this, my daughter was in a private school and we had a close relationship with her teacher. And so I let her know. And I just said, hey, if you see anything, because she was gonna be, notifying me anyway if Emma had seizures or anything out of it.
And it helps you keep track of what's working and what's not too.
Well,
and
I'm
the teachers
a-
get the feedback.
I'm a chronic, note taker, so like, I've got a binder full of everything. But the director at this private school, I was not really a fan of. And so I just asked the teacher, I said, could we just keep this between us? Because really, it's not, nobody's.
Right.
It's not anyone's.
They're not medical professionals.
They're not medical professionals, I'm doing it legally. However, about a year, I think, after we started cannabis, maybe 2 years, it kind of blurs together, we moved to public schools.
and my husband and I decided we were gonna be transparent. Because if they wanted wanted us as, if they wanted my daughter as a student, they were gonna have to accept all of her. But the other thing you do have to think about too is does your child need medication during school hours?
That is a big hurdle for us parents. I have to literally go to my daughter's school every day and take her off campus,
Yeah.
medicate her, and then sign her back into
Sure,
campus.
you're 1,000 feet from the school.
So it's,
That's
will be
DDD.
forever.
What's the
So
DDD?
We actually have Senator Casada here in the house. I want everybody to sit down. And he is going to sit down with us and kind of talk about how we can actually modify this law so that way we can medicate our children. So this is a big thing that we're working on, and we're thankful for his help and his interest and passion about helping our kids as well.
And, yeah, absolutely. We're almost done, guys. Real quick with that CPS, because I've had CPS visit my house because there was a behavioral health specialist who wanted to know how Emma was doing, and she was doing great because she was on cannabis. And this lady took it upon herself to assume that I was giving it to her illegally. Went to her supervisor. Supervisor said, well, you need to call CPS. And a few days later, I had 2 cops and a CPS worker at my house, ready to interrogate. Now, when they came, I was like totally taken aback, but they wanted to see her patient card and my caregiver card. And I said, sure, here it is. As soon as I showed it and they scanned it and they saw it was valid, they left. CPS, on the other hand, they opened a case and now they have to close that case, and then that case is in your file for a year. So you have to just play by the rules. I had an attorney on standby. I had called him while they were at the house, and he's like, just do what they say. You're not doing anything wrong. This was 4 months into my journey, so it was kind of traumatic, yeah. But now I feel better about the whole situation. Empowerment, for sure.
We're gonna actually go ahead and cut off the video so that way we can have an open Q&A in case maybe you don't want that to be on camera. So, do you wanna go ahead and end that? Thank you.
Yeah, so we'd love to take those questions.